I never wanted this job. Not really. I took it because it paid a few dollars more an hour than warehouse work, and I figured, how hard could it be? Sit in a trailer, walk the site every hour, flash the light around a bit, and call it a night. The construction site is just outside the city, far enough from traffic and lights to feel like the edge of nowhere, especially after dark. During the day, it's buzzing with workers and the grind of heavy machinery. But at night it's quiet. Dead quiet. No generators. No security cameras. Just wind moving through hollow beams and the occasional creak of unfinished floors settling. The building isn't finished, it's just concrete and metal for now, maybe 3 stories tall. No drywall. No windows. Just a skeleton of what's going to be a new block of condos. There's one entrance in, padlocked after the last worker leaves, and I'm the only one with the key at night. I start my shift at 9 p.m., do a walkthrough every hour, and stay until the morning crew shows up around 6. Most nights, I sit in the security trailer with my thermos, watching Netflix on my phone with one eye open. It's boring, which is exactly what I wanted. But a few weeks ago something changed. The first time I heard it, I brushed it off. It was around 2 a.m., cold and windless, and I was doing my usual lap through the second floor. My boots echoed hard on the concrete as I moved through the hallway, lighting up rebar and stacked drywall sheets with my flashlight. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. From above. Slow, deliberate steps on the 3rd floor, heavy ones like work boots. I stopped walking. And they didn't. They kept going, a few paces, then silence. I stood there in the dark, the flashlight trembling slightly in my hand, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a sheet of plywood shifted. Maybe it was an echo of my own steps. Maybe I was tired. But something didn't sit right. The 3rd floor wasn't accessible yet. The temporary stairway had been taken down days before due to safety issues. There was no way up there unless you had a ladder, and I would have seen that. I checked the perimeter again, convinced maybe some drunk had wandered in, but the padlock was untouched. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the dirt near the entrance. Still, I didn't sleep well the next day. The next night, it happened again, this time at 1:37 a.m. exactly. Footsteps. Upstairs. Pacing. I didn't go up. I told myself I was being paranoid. I just finished my rounds early and stayed in the trailer for the rest of the shift. I didn't tell the site manager. What could I say? Hey, I think there's a ghost walking around the 3rd floor? I needed the job. But the 3rd night, it wasn't just footsteps. It was a voice. The 3rd night started like all the others, the bitter cold wrapping around me like a shroud as I locked the gate behind the last truck leaving the site. The moon was low, barely slicing the dark sky with a thin, cold light. The empty streets beyond the construction site were silent, swallowed whole by shadows. I set off on my first round at 9:15 p.m., flashlight in hand. My breath puffed out in short, visible bursts, the beam cutting through the dense blackness of the unfinished building's hollow corridors. The concrete walls were rough and cold under my fingertips as I brushed past them, the scent of wet cement and rusted rebar filling the air. Upstairs, where the skeletal stairs ended abruptly into nothing but open space, the air felt heavier. Sometimes I imagined the bones of the building groaning in pain, as if alive and aware of its own incompletion. The silence was thick, oppressive, like a held breath waiting to be released. At 1:37 a.m., the same time as the previous night, the footsteps returned, slow, heavy, measured, but this time there was something else. Just beyond the threshold of my hearing, a faint murmur surfaced, like voices carried on the wind through cracked windows that didn't exist yet. I stopped, heart thudding so loud I was sure it would echo through the concrete shells of the walls. The voice was soft at first, almost lost in the vast emptiness, distant, but unmistakably human. Words, or something like words, whispered in broken sentences I couldn't quite make out. It wasn't a shout or a scream, it was quiet, almost pleading, layered with something deeper: fear? Anguish? I stepped closer to the stairwell, though I knew the temporary stairs were gone. I peered upward into the dark abyss where the 3rd floor should be. My flashlight's beam trembled as I moved it upward, but the darkness swallowed the light like a hungry void. The voices stopped the moment I focused, replaced by silence so profound it pressed against my ears. A cold draft swept past me, raising goosebumps along my arms. The temperature dropped noticeably, though no wind blew outside. The hairs on my neck stood on end. I felt the building shift slightly beneath my feet, a barely perceptible groan, but enough to remind me this place was alive in its own way. The silence lasted only a moment before the voices returned, this time clearer. Words formed in the dark like fragments from a broken memory. Help can't leave. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to run. Every instinct screamed for me to get out, but I was rooted there, caught between fear and curiosity. Was I losing my mind? I tried calling out, but my voice sounded strange in the cold air, brittle, lost. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Just the soft shuffle of footsteps moving away, retreating deeper into the shadows. I spent the rest of my shift pacing the ground floors, eyes darting to every corner, ears straining for the slightest sound. I checked the locks again, all secure. I searched for footprints, signs of trespassers, anything. Nothing. When dawn finally cracked the sky open with pale, fragile light, I collapsed into the trailer chair, exhausted and jittery. The coffee was cold, the silence around me unnerving. I stared at the padlock on the gate like it was a fragile barrier holding back some dark secret. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? What could I say? The voices, the footsteps in an impossible place, it sounded insane. But I knew what I heard was real. And whatever was in that building wasn't going anywhere. By the fourth night, I stopped pretending I didn't hear it. I stopped telling myself it was the wind, or the building settling, or the echo of my own boots. Something was up there. And it knew I was down here. When I arrived that night, just after sunset, I noticed something immediately, a smell. It hit me as I stepped out of my car. Metallic, sharp, like rust soaked in wet fabric. The kind of smell you associate with old blood and forgotten places. It wasn't there the night before. I walked the perimeter like I always did. Everything looked untouched. The gate was still locked from the outside, the chain unbroken. The building stood there, silent and empty, but no longer dead. It felt like it was watching me now. I hesitated before stepping inside the skeleton of the structure. The beams above my head stretched into the growing darkness like the ribs of some colossal beast. My flashlight flickered once. Just once. It had never done that before. I gave it a shake and the light held steady, but something inside me had already shifted. I kept my pace slow as I climbed the first flight of stairs, the concrete steps worn and uneven underfoot. My breath echoed off the walls, too loud in the silence. The shadows seemed deeper than they had any right to be. I reached the second floor, where the hallway yawned out before me, a long, narrow tunnel framed by steel and wire, ending in open air where a window would someday be. I walked the full length of the corridor. I paused. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I looked up. No stairs, no ladder, no crawl space. Just the exposed concrete slab of the third floor ceiling. Nothing above. Nothing visible. But then I saw it. At first it looked like a stain. A patch of darker concrete. But the longer I stared, the more it became something else. Moved. No, not moved. It shifted. Like it was breathing. A shape. Slumped against the edge of the ceiling as if crouched low. A figure, maybe. Or a shadow pretending to be one. I blinked and raised my flashlight. The moment the beam touched that spot, it was gone. Nothing there but concrete again. I stood frozen, the breath in my lungs suddenly too tight. My ears rang in the silence, and then, tap, 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 3 knocks. Directly above me. Slow. Measured. Like someone knocking on a door or a coffin. I stepped back. My boot crunched over something. I looked down and saw a fragment of drywall broken in half. On its surface, scrawled in dust and something darker, maybe charcoal, maybe dried blood, was a word. Watch. That was it. Nothing more. Just watch. I turned around and walked, fast and stiff, down the hallway and back to the stairs. I didn't run. Not yet. Something told me if I ran it would chase me. Not physically, maybe. But it would follow me all the same. And I didn't want to know what it looked like in motion. Back in the trailer, I sat down and locked the door behind me, though I knew that door wouldn't matter if it wanted in. I turned off my flashlight and sat in the dark. My coffee had gone cold again. My hands shook slightly as I lifted it. I sipped anyway. Just to do something human. That's when I heard the trailer door click. Just a soft metal sound, like pressure gently lifting the latch. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared into the black mirror of the window in front of me, waiting to see a face appear behind the glass. But nothing did. The click didn't repeat. The wind didn't blow. The trailer didn't move. Still, I knew it had been real. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't guarding an empty building. I wasn't protecting it from trespassers or vandals. I was the one being watched. I didn't sleep that day. I lay on my couch with the curtains drawn, trying to pretend that sunlight still meant safety, that whatever was happening only belonged to the hours between dusk and dawn. But it didn't work. I kept thinking about the words scratched into the broken drywall, watch, and the way it looked like someone had written it in a hurry, as if they hadn't expected to finish. Worse than that was the silence. My apartment felt like the building now, hollow, unfinished. Every creak in the ceiling, every buzz from a neighbor's television made me tense up. I kept imagining something crouched in the corners of rooms I couldn't see into, waiting patiently for the light to die. I returned to the site that evening, hoping stupidly, maybe that it would be a normal night. That nothing would happen. That maybe the stress had caught up with me. That maybe there were simpler explanations. But something was already off. When I unlocked the gate and swung it open, I noticed the chain had been wound differently tighter, with the padlock facing the wrong way. I told myself I'd just rushed the night before. But my hands were sweating before I even reached the trailer. Inside, everything looked the same: my chair, my thermos, my clipboard. But the thermos had been uncapped, and there was a black smear across the stainless steel, like someone had touched it with fingers dipped in ash. I did my first round anyway. I walked stiffly through the main floor, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The building groaned overhead as usual, but there was a new rhythm now, not mechanical or random, but almost organic, like breathing hidden in the cracks between sounds. I reached the second floor. That same corridor stretched ahead of me, the space silent, vast, and open to the sky on one end. I could see the city in the distance, cold lights blinking behind haze, but the floor around me felt sealed off from the world. Sealed in. Something caught my eye near one of the structural columns. Another piece of drywall, this one smaller, leaned awkwardly against the concrete. And on it, in that same dark, broken script, was another word. Stay. I turned my flashlight slowly to the slab above me, the third floor, unreachable. That's when I heard it. A voice. Louder this time. Closer. Whispering not from above, but from behind the concrete column to my left. A whisper like someone breathing through cracked lips. You see it now. I nearly dropped the flashlight. I staggered back and turned the beam into the dark. Nothing there. Just dust in the air and the rust-colored stains of rainwater running down the walls. I stood frozen, the air thick and unmoving. The whisper was gone, but it had been real. Too real. It was like someone had leaned in close, just behind my shoulder, their breath cold against my ear. I backed away toward the stairwell. I didn't care if it looked cowardly. I didn't care what the cameras would have shown, if there had been any. I just needed to be back on the ground. But as I reached the stairs, I saw something that stopped me dead. A ladder. A tall, industrial ladder, the kind used by contractors, now stood bolted against the wall, leading straight up to the third floor. It hadn't been there before. I knew it hadn't. There hadn't been any access to the third floor for over a week. I would have noticed. Someone would have told me. It wasn't in any of the reports. The installation wasn't even scheduled yet. The bolts in the wall were clean, almost new looking, no dust or rust on them. As if someone had installed it today. Or just for me. At that moment, I should have left. I should have walked down the stairs, locked the gate behind me, and never come back. But something stronger than fear rooted me there. Not curiosity, not even courage, just this strange gravity that seemed to pull me upward. Like the building wanted me to see. I tested the ladder. It was cold to the touch. It didn't move. My boots clanked against the rungs as I started to climb, slowly, one step at a time. The flashlight was held tight in my free hand, beam aimed high. Halfway up, I paused. I didn't want to look. But I did. The edge of the third floor came into view, cracked concrete, rebar sticking up like broken fingers. And past that edge, just barely visible in the beam of light, was a shape. Not a full figure. Not exactly. Just legs, as if someone was crouched behind a column, motionless, knees bent at an unnatural angle. The beam trembled. I blinked. The legs were gone. But the dust on the floor where they had been was disturbed. I climbed the last few rungs and stepped onto the slab. The cold here was different, not just air but something else. A kind of pressure behind the eyes. The hair on my arms stood up before the wind even hit me. It was darker than it should have been. The moon above was bright and full, but up here, it barely touched the floor. The shadows were too thick. Too deliberate. Like they were hiding something. The third floor stretched in three directions: left, right, and dead ahead, where it opened into what would become an atrium. The whispering began again. This time from all sides. Not words. Not really. Just fragments. Overlapping syllables. A chorus of half-spoken thoughts. Breaths that didn't match the wind. Something was here with me. Something that had been waiting. I didn't walk. I didn't call out. I just stood there, flashlight trembling in my grip, listening. The whispers faded. And then I saw it. Not in front of me but reflected in the beam of light bouncing off a rusted panel. A figure. Slouched. Facing away. I turned the flashlight directly on it. Nothing there. But the cold deepened. I backed away, heart pounding in my throat, and that's when I felt breath against my ear again. Not wind. Not imagination. Breath. A whisper. Now you're part of it. I spun around, flashlight slashing the dark, but there was only empty concrete and shadow. I ran. Down the ladder, out the building, through the gate I didn't bother locking, and into my car, not stopping until the sight was a memory in the rearview mirror. I quit the next morning. No 2 weeks. No explanation. I just left. But I still hear it sometimes. At night. In my apartment. Footsteps above me. Even though I live on the top floor. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I swear I see something behind me. Watching. Just watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story.